No breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So come burn down my escape. I wanna feel it, come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. You never no breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So come burn down my escape. I wanna feel it, come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. No breath, no heartbeat, just static remains. Hollow reflections, ghosts in the cold. So comfort down my escape. I wanna feel it, come drag me into the void. Let my circuits decay. I'm sorry, but it's too late. You build a you built a monster. You built a monster. You built a monster.
I'm behind the thing. Ah. Oh, I'm also not wearing anything. There we go. That's better. Well, well, well. Now I'm covering the timer. We'll put this, like, there. That's fine. Can kind of read that. Like a real small. Ugh. Perfect. I'll just be a talking head down here for the next few minutes. Hopefully not. The artist didn't draw anything inappropriate anywhere on this model, so even when it isn't technically clothed, it's still fine. I'm not in that much danger, thankfully. Before I get too far, did anyone have to watch ads today when they hopped into my stream? I mean, I hope that all of you are using ad block, because the internet is really annoying without it, but... No ads? Excellent. I accidentally upgraded my Twitch account when I was trying to go through notifications, and they were like, congratulations, you get to show ads now, and then didn't really give me a choice in the matter. So I tried to walk it back, and I think I did. So hopefully no ads. But there is technically a full model here. Well, so little. I hardly ever use the full thing because none of the arms or legs are attached or anything. I can just kind of drag it around, but anyway. Perfect. Teeny, teeny. Alright, we're in between songs. Oh, perfect. I'm going to actually pause the art gallery real fast. So for those of you who were here last week, this art piece literally just got finished last night by an artist that I am also working with on the book, and it depicts the ending of last time. So I can use this as a bit of a transition for, recap before we hop in. So last time, we rejoined Naira and her basement guest, Renetta Dolahan, as they started diving into why these killings might be happening, who might be responsible, who wants the 13 targeted. They were cut short when Naira was called back into work and asked to report to the police department so that she could continue helping with the investigation. She did. When we rejoined Detective Leo Parsons, he was on scene, investigating, talking to people, asking about what happened the night before, and she joined him in time to run into one particular Bryce Luxon. If you'll recall, Bryce has had not one, but two run-ins with the Alchemancer up to this point. And, well, technically, that made three. I did not know this timer was going to make noise. We're going to make that stop. Bye-bye, timer. Oh, and now it's trying to grab the YouTube. Ah, ding ding. All right. So, during the interview, Bryce tried his best to help clue in Leo that perhaps the person he was looking for was closer than he assumed. Leo didn't pick up on it. Naira did, and hijinks ensued. The interview continued on, and when they went to leave the scene of the crime, Naira smelled something on the air, and Leo bumped into someone on the way to his car. When they got there and fired it up, the car exploded, which was terrifying for all involved. My cat is attacking my hand as I try to pet him. So, the car exploded. Naira was the first to regain consciousness, and if it weren't for her, Leo would not have survived. She broke out of the car, dragged him out of the car, and used a little bit of magic to shock him back to life. Apologies for the interruption. My cat decided that that was when he wanted to play with my thigh with his claws. So yeah, Naira used the remaining electrum crystals at her disposal to try to jumpstart Leo's heart. It ran out, so she tapped into something a little more, well, her backup plan, and used her own blood, which normally people use when they're wanting to make necrom or necral reactions or void magic and the like. In her blood, she learned that there's something else that she can use. There's a spark that lives there, and she was able to use her own blood to provide the electricity needed to rescue poor Leo. And this awesome picture shows it beautifully, and I love it, and it makes me so happy. All right, so that's what happened last time. You guys ready to get started? I'm going to take that as a yes. Mic level's okay. Everything sounding good. No weird background noises or anything to worry about. Hi, bud. That's my Mountain Dew you're trying to sneak. Yeah, I don't want you knocking that over, bro. That'd make a whole big mess over here. Awesome. I don't think Riker needs Mountain Dew. You would, hey, excuse you. I'm already chewing on the corner of my monitor. Listen, bud. All right. Well, if at any point ads do pop up, start yelling in the chat, and I will wait until the ads pass by. I I think I got it taken care of to where there shouldn't be any, but if not, just let me know. All right. Chapter 11. Recovery. Leo awoke to a consciousness he didn't want. His head felt heavy, like something was trying to smother his alertness and drag him back to sleep. He swallowed, and it hurt. Something soft supported his back, while his tail brushed against the floor below him through a slot in the bed. An all too familiar beep awakened the first of his drowsy emotions. Anger. Seed Mother sent him straight to Anima's bosom for him to be torn apart by her spawn. A day trip through the horrors of Fenina held more appeal to Leo than losing one more second of his life to a bracking hospital. No wonder his head felt so heavy. They'd likely drugged him without his consent, the useless bastards. Can't solve a problem. Wrap it in the blanket of legal, mind-altering substances, and lay it to bed on the front step like it's suddenly better. He shifted against the expensive, high-thread sheets, only to feel a pinch in his arm. So they'd stuck him too. Go figure. Slowly, he risked opening his eyes. The merest crack let in the soft orange of Fyrom light. It wasn't inherently unpleasant, and it didn't hurt his eyes. It still stung. The light shone with platitudes Leo despised. Smells of sterility couldn't hide the stench of false hopes and death. And the beeping. Every beep was a nail hammered into his brain. It was increasing in speed, the blows coming faster as his stress levels increased. Fenina's feedback loop. Leo swam through the soup of his mind, looking for relevant memories like a child might bob for apples. He remembered being on a case, factory, his car. His car! The stupid thing had tried to kill him. If he'd ended up in a hospital instead of a grave, then even his car had finally let him down. So what idiot had brought him here to suffer, instead of letting the car take him on a journey of a more eternal nature? Turning his head to the side shot jolts of pain through his annoyingly stiff neck. It felt like he'd been haymakered across his whole face. Ignoring the pain, he discovered that he wasn't alone in the room. A large snipperd in an officer's uniform slept in an oversized armchair mere feet from the bed. The sight of his best friend awakened the second of Leo's groggy emotions. Guilt. It swirled with the anger, courting it like a pair of expert dancers trying to outperform each other. Leo sighed. What other idiot was there who would pull his sorry rump from a car that had... what? Been hit? Exploded? Some of his toes were incredibly sore, though he couldn't see them beneath the sheets. His inability to flex them indicated they'd been wrapped together, too. Bringing a hand to his face revealed another place they'd stuck him, the back of his hand. Several fingers were bandaged together, turning his hand into a useless plank. He rubbed at his drooping eyes, too angry and sore to go back to sleep. Dragging his hand down his snout, his nose picked up whiffs of smoke and necrol. He grimaced as the stuff tickled his throat. Then he coughed. Fresh pain joined the party as his ribs announced their presence alongside his sore throat. The coughing caused Tolson to stir. He awoke far too quickly, nearly tripping as he rushed to the bedside. "Leo? You're awake!" Leo groaned, voice coming out a bit scratchy. "Yeah, unfortunately. We should do something about that." The bed creaked as Tolson leaned on the edge. "I can call a nurse. Maybe they can give you something. Help you sleep." Leo whipped his head towards his friend so fast, the pain took a second to catch up. "Not what I meant." The current state of his voice made the words exit in more of a growl than he meant, and Tolson wilted. "Sorry, man, I forgot. I didn't mean..." Leo waved a dismissive hand, IV line trailing from its back. "Just get me some water or something." "Yeah, sure. They left you some." Tolson pointed across the bed. Leo tried to look left, only to discover he couldn't. It wasn't just that it hurt to try to look left. His neck simply refused to turn past the point of looking straight ahead. After a few seconds of Leo's struggling, Tolson walked around the bed and grabbed the water for him. Leo drank with loud gulps. While he wasn't exactly thirsty, the IVs were taking care of that. It still felt good on his throat to drink something. His voice recovered a bit too. "Tolson? Yeah? What the Fanina happened?" Tolson smirked, and his mouth read amusement, even as his eyes betrayed his concern. "Well, It seems the old girl got tired of you bossing her around without caring for her. Whatever you did, I guess she went up in flames. You took an airbag to the face and some burns. I don't really know the details. I was at Benji's when I got the call. Then his ears drooped. I'm sorry, dude. I should have been there. Well, so much for Tolson being the idiot to pull him from a burning car. Then who? Guilt doused the thought, scattering it into smoke as he remembered his oversight. What happened to Naira? Tolson's ears regained some of their perk. She saved you, dude. Melissa said that Naira fought the flames, helped her pull you from the car. Melissa was there? Yeah, she hadn't left the scene yet. She and Naira both pulled me free? Nina, never living that down. Tolson shrugged. I don't know. Melissa's not really the type to hold grudges. Leo stared at him. Tolson, I hit my head, but I didn't hit it that hard. Melissa's absolutely the type to hold grudges. Especially when Leo was involved. The bed creaked as Tolson readjusted his posture, continuing to lean against it. Ooh, yeah, no, you're right. Not wanting to dwell on Melissa, Leo asked the burning question. So, what happened to Naira? Tolson checked over his shoulder as if he was going to see her in the doorway. Leo tried to follow his gaze, but his neck still refused to rotate that far. She was here for a while, Tolson admitted, but she didn't let him do much to her. I think she hates hospitals as much as you do. Leo's water suddenly tasted bitter on his tongue. Very much doubt that. Regardless, she checked herself out about an hour ago. She wanted to go home, and I can't say I blame her. But she could walk and speak without her throat killing her? Tolson nodded. Yeah, she seemed a bit banged up, but not nearly like you. She didn't have to take an airbag to the face. The emotional dance in Leo's head shifted. Dryly, he grumbled, so happy for her. His friend shot him a look of horror. I should hope so, dude. She's nice. She doesn't deserve to be hurt. I do. Sometimes. Gee. Thanks, Tolson. They spent the next 5 minutes catching up. Tolson shared what he knew, but he himself admitted it wasn't much. Mechanic said something under the hood had cracked and worn out over time. Used a lot of part names I don't know. So when you tried to start the car, it triggered a firearm reaction with no shielding. Result? A fireball. At least, that's the part Miss Naira added. Leo mulled over what he'd learned. So, my car just happened to wear out enough to explode? According to the mechanic? Yeah. Tolson leaned in with a conspiratorial grin. But Miss Naira didn't seem to think so. She said that. Tolson's grin wavered. Well, not with words, but she was frowning a lot while she listened to the mechanic. I don't think she believed him. If it wasn't an accident, I don't like the alternative. Leo was only 26. He couldn't have that many enemies yet. Motion in his periphery drew his attention to the door. The pain in his neck transitioned to a pain in his head when he saw who stood in the doorway. Melissa eyed him with a look he couldn't decipher. At a minimum, she was definitely annoyed, so maybe he had one enemy to worry about. No one bothered Naira on the bus ride back to District 11. Her fur reeked of smoke and necrum. The nurse had offered to let her use a shower, but Naira hadn't trusted them to return her things. Besides, they probably would have tried to keep her overnight for observation. That was a no-go for a number of reasons, not least of which was the cat she still needed to feed at home. People on the bus actually left empty seats around her. Maybe she should do this more often. Well, not the whole exploding car thing. It was just another reason not to own a car. No, that wasn't fair. It hadn't been the car's fault. It was deliberate. It had to be. Detective Parsons' car was in bad shape, but it wasn't that faulty. Naira wanted to kick herself. She was also too sore to have any desire to move. It's been a rough 20 hours. She should have smelled the sulfur sooner. No, that wasn't the problem. She had smelled it before getting in the car. She just hadn't registered the scent. Even now, thinking back on it made her a bit weak in the knees. They'd been passed by a Nolf as they had walked to the detective's car. A Nolf wearing green and white. He'd flashed a V at them with his hand, like a half-hearted wave, keeping his face hidden the whole time. That Nolf had smelled of sulfur and necrol, yes, but that hadn't been what caught Naira's attention. Somehow, that Nolf had carried a trace of Tazale's scent. That meant one of two things. Either the people holding her son captive wanted Detective Parsons dead, or far more likely, they wanted Naira dead. Had they found out about Dolahan? Did she need to kill her when she got home? Fear squeezed her heart, and Naira forgot to pull the cord at her stop. The bus driver pulled over anyway. Bless him for that. The air was humid tonight. Not only could she smell it, but her fur and hair were fritzing a bit. Tomorrow would be a storm day. No, Naira had done her diligence, despite the last-minute change in plans. The traces she left for the police had been gobbled up like candy. Everyone she talked to at the scene seemed to believe she'd really disposed of the body. There was just no way anyone knew that Dolahan was still alive. Her thumb drummed on the strap of her bag as she walked. The risk sank in again. Was it really worth risking what little family she had left over some self-absorbed rich person she hardly knew? Worse, now that she'd spent a whole morning talking to this woman, could she still kill her? If it was the only way to keep Elaine and Tazale safe? She'd killed to keep them safe before, but she also hadn't been stupid enough to spend any time with the victims. Yeah, they probably had it coming, but that didn't mean Naira enjoyed being the one to do it. Once, she might have. Now, her anger was a cool and steady thing, not explosive like it had been back in her Salatra days. An angry ball of snarling deerhound crashed into the chain-link fence beside her. Naira was so lost in her thoughts, she hadn't even registered she was almost home. Taking a moment, she cracked a Tarim crystal and sat with the beast. Together, they started to calm. By the time she left, it had stopped chewing on the fence to get at her. There was no mail, save for an ad for a local roofing company. Her eyes drifted up to the bleached gray shingles clinging by their corners and spots. The house looked a bit like a snake that was partway through molting. On only her income, there was no affording any replacement work. If Elaine was still playing concerts, maybe. Just thinking of her husband was like jumping into a pond you thought was warm, only to find it was cold. Her breath caught, and her fingers went numb. She had no problem with her keys tonight, however. There was no mail on the floor either, which was an immediate relief. The house looked and smelled as she left it, though it seemed as humid inside as outside. Before anything, she wanted a shower. She'd fix dinner for her and her guest afterwards. The clock on the nightstand read 18:54 as she deposited her alchemy bag on her bed. Shedding her clothes in a lumpy pile, Naira hopped in the shower. She turned the handle, bracing for the shock of cold. Nothing happened. Not even a drip. She'd only been 2 days late on the water bill. Surely they hadn't shut her off for that. Her growl lasted for as long as it took her to slip her pants back on. She only threw on a shirt because she was headed outside. After all, if they had shut her off, she knew where to turn it back on. Donning her alchemy bag again, she stopped on the main floor to grab a few tools from the closet. This floor was definitely more humid. She must have left a window open. A fresh dose of prism and an aquam pick let her undo the lock on the panel outside her back fence. They'd only installed the lock after she'd figured out this was where the valve lived. This wasn't a new dance for Naira. Even so, the lock was such a flimsy thing she could have probably forced it with a screwdriver. Nevertheless, There was no sense in letting them know how ineffective their measures were. Let the people with power imagine that power kept them safe. She triple-checked, but the valve was still on. There should be water to the house. With a sigh, she closed and locked the panel and returned to her house. If the main to the house was still good, then there must be a problem with the plumbing in the basement. Looked like she'd be checking on her guest first, after all. Grabbing the key from the hook on the wall, Naira opened the basement door. Humid, musty air nearly bowled her over as it flooded up the stairs. The bottom step was hidden beneath standing water. Perfect. Just what she needed to deal with tonight. Mr. Teen, what the fanina did you do? No response. Just the normal, ambient house creaks. Sneppered hearing being what it was, Naira had no doubt she'd been heard. Unless Renetta had managed to drown herself in 6 inches of water. Might not be the worst outcome to hope for. Clearly Renetta had broken something. The copper piping downstairs was old, but Naira would have smelled the effects of a leak sooner. Naira had left her guest handcuffed to a water line in the bathroom, assuming it to be a courtesy to leave Renetta somewhere that she could attend to her own basic needs. Now she was just glad she hadn't handcuffed the woman to a gas line. Renetta, it's not like you left the basement. I know you're still down there. Still no response. Though, as Naira strained to listen, she heard a tiny splash. Renetta, it's been an awful day. I had a car blow up in my face. Can we not do this right now? Dead silence. Fine, Naira grumbled around a sigh. She still had a bit of prism in her system, and a whole lot of pent-up frustration that the day still wasn't done yet. She could handle a single troublemaking cat. She didn't bother to load her catalyst with an Electrum cartridge. She was tired, but not tired enough to think electricity was good to play with around that much standing water. Naira had little desire to kill herself or her guest. Instead, she loaded an Aurum cartridge. She hoped simply having the handgun would be enough to stop Renetta from doing anything stupid. If not, she could probably restrain her again. That would be a last resort, though. She wasn't looking forward to the scratches that might bring. Rolling up her pant legs, Naira descended the stairs. The water lapped against her ankles as her paws reached the floor. Renetta, I'm not in the mood for games. It's clear you've already made a mess. Come out, and let's talk about this. A stray sock bobbed in the water beside her as she slowly walked forward. She was suddenly grateful the Electrum sockets were halfway off the ground, well above the water line. There weren't many rooms to search down here, and Naira turned on the lights as she went. Checking the bathroom revealed what she'd already expected to find. The water line she'd fixed her guest to had been bent and mangled at a joint. Even now, stray drops fell from the open elbow, residual water in the lines draining from the upper floors. She'd have to sweat the copper again before turning the water back on, to say nothing of all this standing water, but even thinking about it was already giving Naira a headache. Slowly, she continued searching the basement. Despite the fun new wet smells, she still caught distinctive whiffs of snippered. They were accompanied by fear. This felt appropriate. If Naira hadn't been considering Renetta... Well, it had to happen eventually. If Naira hadn't been considering killing Renetta before, she was certainly contemplating it now. Each footstep made a sloshing noise, despite her best efforts to move quietly. Passing the laundry machines, she saw that the valve for the water main had indeed been closed. It seemed Miss 13 might have some sense about her. The spare bedroom door was open, so Naira headed that way. The smells she needed to find grew stronger. Renetta! Yes, I'm mad. Yes, I'm disappointed. But if you come out now, I promise I probably won't zap you on the spot. Naira felt around the door for the light switch. She found it, but was unable to flip it on before something smashed into her hand. Naira gasped, breathing out sharply through her nose as her hand numbed with spreading pain. She drew her hand back, and light reflected off of a baseball bat she'd made for her boys. It swung in an arc again, finding her elbow. Renetta didn't have a lot of strength to her, but the bat was making up for the difference. Numbing tingles spread through Naya's... Try it again. Numbing tingles spread through Naira's entire arm. She could see Renetta now. The politician's clothing was dark from all the water it had absorbed. Still handcuffed together, her hands were shaking where she held the bat in a non-optimal grip. Despite her disheveled, soggy appearance, there was a fire dancing in her eyes, more than just the firearm lights in the basement. It was a look Naira knew quite personally. Renetta screamed, charging to take another swing. Raising her catalyst, Naira fired. The aurum crystal inside shattered, and Naira reached out with her prism. She encompassed the release of energy before shaping it into a pressure wave she directed at Renetta's chest. The wind magic swept forward a moment later, cutting off Renetta's swing, loosening her grip on the bat, and tossing her backwards against a wall. Between the initial burst and Renetta's own splash, water was flung about the room wildly. Suppressing a growl, Naira put the catalyst back in her bag. She let her left arm dangle for the moment, grateful that her use of prism hadn't left much in her system to flare the sensation of pain. Renetta was flailing, trying to wipe water from her eyes. She was lucky to still have those. More accurately, she was lucky Naira had chosen to direct the pressure at her chest, not her face. Naira had witnessed firsthand how an aurum burst could pop a person's eyeballs. The results weren't pretty. Stalking forward, Naira planted a foot on the sputtering woman's chest before forcing her back under the water. She yanked her foot free before Renetta could retaliate, and the woman's claws found empty air. Turning, Naira scooped up the bat, then flipped on the light. Water streamed from Renetta as she stood up, coughing and sputtering. Then her face contorted into a snarling hiss. Naira avoided putting pressure on her quickly bruising left arm as she leaned against the doorframe. Got something to say for yourself, Mr. Teen? I think it's time we used our words. Get out of my way, native! Not the words I would have chosen, but I suppose it's a start. Renetta snarled, claws unfurling as she took a step forward. Naira raised the bat, pointing it at Renetta's chest like a sword. The Sneppard stopped in place, staring at the thing with a fear that tinged the air. She was confident. She wasn't stupid. Silence spanned the gap between them, while both women's breathing cooled. Finally, Renetta spoke. What now, love? Going to beat me to death with that, now that you have me cornered? Naira shrugged. We've been over this. If I wanted you dead, I'd have killed you already. Then just let me go. I'm clearly more trouble than I'm worth. Naira glanced around. You did make a fine mess of things. I've been needing to clean the basement for a while, but this isn't exactly what I had in mind. Renetta fixed her with a stern gaze. Let me go. Shaking her head, Naira replied, I cannot. Why not? It would be a waste. People I love would be killed. You would be killed. In fact, I was almost killed today, and there's a very real chance that it's because I didn't kill you. So letting you go would lead to a lot of needless death, and I don't want that. Do you? Renetta's claws flexed as she worked her fingers. She met Naira's gaze for a long time, then her shoulders slumped. No, she finally admitted. No one else has been killed since last night, right? Naira lowered the bat to a more comfortable position. Not that I know of. In fact, your daughter showed up looking for you. Moira did? Her guarded expression returned, though she couldn't hide her surprise. Yeah, she wasn't very happy. Got in the face of just about every police officer who stood in her way. And what happened to her, exactly? She stormed off. Went to register a complaint at the police station, or something equally useless. But she's safe. The tone made the implication clear. Is she safe from you? Naira rolled her eyes. I'm not gonna hurt your kid. Vanina, woman, I don't even want to hurt you. But you're stubborn and keep causing problems. Renetta tried to fold her arms, but the handcuffs wouldn't allow it. She persisted for a bit, then gave up with a snort. Maybe I wouldn't be such a problem if I wasn't being held against my will. For your own good. For my good? Renetta raised an eyebrow. Don't you mean for your good? Naira sighed. Can't it be both? It'd be really nice to stop killing people. Renetta simply stared at her. You realize most normal people don't go around killing people, right, love? You're not going to get much sympathy from me. Letting her gaze wander, Naira groaned. Not looking for sympathy, just stating a fact. Renetta frowned. But didn't you want to kill the people holding onto your family? I mean, kind of. So the killing only stops after you've had a chance to kill all the people you really want to kill? Which may or may not include me based on my behavior? Naira had to admit there was no pleasant answer. More accurately, the truth wasn't pleasant to think about. So she let out a tired, yes. Renetta shook her head. Great. Wonderful. So I'm just supposed to accept that I'm being held prisoner by a homicidal native who keeps me locked in her basement and might kill me on a whim. Naira was too spent from the day to put up with it any longer. Don't call me that, please. Love, I'm not stupid. I can see the glow in your eyes. Do you really expect me to look at the situation and believe that I'm talking to someone of sound, unaltered mind? A fresh spike of pain leapt forward as Naira's shoulders slumped. Look, like I said, today's been awful for both of us. I survived an explosion, only to come home to a flooded basement, and probably one or two broken fingers. Weird as it is to admit, I'm glad you didn't let the flooding continue. If I'm being honest, though, surprised you knew how to shut off the valve for the water main. Renetta straightened up a bit at that. Yes, well, I did try to leave first, but the door was sturdier than I cared to admit. In the moment, I didn't care a bit about your house. Frankly, I still don't. I just didn't want to make an already miserable situation worse. Still, it's appreciated, so thank you. You're welcome. Naira watched a few random pages of old homework assignments float by. Rendell kept everything. He'd taken after his mother's attention to detail in that regard. Water in the unused bedroom came up to the lettering on boxes that hadn't been touched in years. A photo had been knocked from a dusty bookshelf and bobbed nearby. She sighed, then set the bat aside to rescue the picture from drowning. Both boys were dressed up for a game. The water had soaked partway through, darkening the entirety of Rendell, while stopping short of Tazale's neck, leaving his face light and full of life. She wanted to hug the photo, but restrained herself for fear it'd crumble. Instead, she set it reverently back on the shelf. Renetta watched this, but didn't seem to know what to make of it. Naira glanced around, watching water lap up against things long buried. She wasn't sure how much longer she could stay in this room. Well, Madame 13, I made quite a mess of my basement. But tomorrow's storm day, so it's not like we can just open the windows and hope it dries out. You want to get on my good side? Help me get this cleaned up. The well-dressed, but thoroughly soaked Sneppard started to say something, but cut herself off. Her eyes traveled the room, crawling on top of boxes, trailing along tarnished trophies, and glossing over photos. Then she gave a slow nod, handcuff chain clinking as she held her hands out. If I help, can we at least take these off? That's a chapter down. Everyone still with me? Everything still sounding okay? The only problem with hydrating with a carbonated beverage is it makes me burpy. Seems quiet. Is that a volume settings on your end, or is that I need to turn myself up? Because I can turn myself up more if we need it. How's that? Is that better? I can also move the microphone closer, which would help. Ugh. How about that? Is that good? Is that too much? Okie dokie. All right. You guys ready for next chapter? Yeah, like I said, carbonated beverages probably shouldn't be sipping on it, making it difficult. All right. Nope, not quite. Also, jealous of the mug of cocoa, by the way. Okay. Chapter 12 Rehabilitation. Like a true best friend, Tolson gave some half baked excuse about finding a vending machine seconds before he fled the room. Detective Melissa McKinley watched him go, the tip of her tail flicking about. Apparently, she wasn't in a good mood. Was she ever? Leo sighed, leaning back in his bed. He kept his face forwards to avoid the pain in his neck. Melissa strode up anyways, taking the seat Tolson had warmed for her. Detective McKinley, Leo said, unable to hide the hoarseness of his voice. Detective Parsons, she replied. Her eyes rested on his bandaged hand. Silence stretched between them, pulled taut by both sides. How's the case coming, McKinley? Seed Mother Leo, can we not do this right now? Leo. She hadn't called him that in years. It had been, what, 3 years since their last real fight? Sorry, Melissa. She stiffened at the name and glanced away, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she reached into her coat before setting several items on his bedstand. The first was his detective's badge. The second object made his heart rate increase, even though it was holstered and he could see the safety was clearly on. Managed to get these from your car. He wouldn't have minded if the gun had been lost to the fire. Though the gun wasn't really the problem. Maybe the fire should have taken something else. He dismissed the thought almost as soon as it arrived, but the damage was already done. His finger tapped the banister, and his headache wasn't improving. The siren song was back, but muted somehow. My jacket? Melissa glanced over at a coat rack in the corner that held his big brown coat. Had it washed for you after you got here. Same with your uniform. Figured it'd be nice to have something clean to go back to once they wash you up. Excuse me. Hopefully that didn't make it to the microphone. They got a porch or a dedicated smoking zone in this Fanina hole? Melissa snorted at that, and for the first time made eye contact with him. Thought we agreed to quit. Yeah, well, one decision to quit made it impossible to uphold the other decision to quit. Seed Mother Leo, you have become a grouch. Leo bit off the reply before it could leave his mouth. Instead, he admitted, Yeah, I suppose I have. Melissa sighed, rubbing a palm over her eye before sliding it up to run her fingers through her hair. I don't have space to talk. I haven't exactly gotten nicer myself. They sat there, and the silence continued, but now it didn't feel quite so taut. It relaxed even further as she laughed. I'm afraid you're out of luck anyway. When the chief's expert found the pack of neckles in your pocket, she tossed them into the flaming wreckage of your car. I believe her exact words were, "Good riddance." Oh, and I'm pretty sure I saw her pocket your lighter. I was unconscious, and you let her rob me? The escalation in his voice was natural, but it still made him cough. Melissa smirked. She just saved your life, almost single-handedly. I think I'm willing to look the other way when someone's looking out for my... She trailed off, searching for a word. She looked away when she found it. For my coworker. It'd been a while since she'd slapped him in the face. Good to know that some things in the world were still the same. Even so, in his time of need, she'd stepped up to save him. With how badly he'd hurt her, he couldn't fathom why she would do that. Thank you, Melissa, for saving me. She stiffened again, eyes dropping to stare at her own palms. She didn't have to accept it. He still needed to say it. Slowly, she nodded. Yeah, no problem. More silence followed. Leo took a drink of water, his mind racing through dozens of options for steering the conversation. His indecisiveness cost him the opportunity, as Melissa broke the silence first. Leo, we should talk. The beeping from the monitor increased in frequency. The tip of Melissa's tail flicked to and fro by her leg as she continued. We've both hurt each other, but you almost died today, and I'll admit, I was afraid to lose you. That caught Leo off guard. Last he'd known, Melissa had seemed to hate his guts more than he hated cheerful people in the mornings. He didn't interrupt, and she clarified. I saw the car go up in flames, and the first thought that crossed my mind was that I'd lost my chance to ever deal with this thing between us. That I'd never have the chance to apologize or get closure. And I don't want that. It was terrifying to admit, but Leo didn't want that either. She deserved truth, even if she'd avoided him. If she was finally ready to talk, then they should talk. Vanina, this talk was gonna hurt. It's time? Leo asked, voice cracked not entirely due to his injuries. Melissa was wringing her hands so vigorously, Leo expected clumps of beautiful silver fur to drop to the floor. Despite her clear misgivings, she forced eye contact as she nodded. Yeah. All right. Leo gulped, trying to focus on forming words around the craving tugging on his sleeve and demanding his attention. He frowned. Did anyone tell them I smoke? Melissa narrowed her eyes, not expecting the change in subject. I think the chief's expert did. Why? Leo eyed his IV bag with renewed suspicion. They'd weaned his mother when she'd first come to the hospital. Either it would help in the long run and actually set him free, or it would just shackle him even worse. Stupid hospitals. What gave them the right to play seed mother with people's lives? Then, to have the audacity to charge on top of that? Want your loved ones to go on living? Better take out a second loan. What a bunch of crooks. Leo shook his head with a sigh. I'll deal with it. Melissa gave a slow nod, then she shrugged. It's gonna suck for a little while. Oops, that's not the line. Melissa gave a slow nod, then she shrugged. It's gonna suck for a long while, but stick it out, and it'll pass. I don't exactly have your raw force of will, Melissa. Sure you do, Leo. You just don't give yourself credit for it. He sighed again. They were almost talking like they used to. It felt nice. It was a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Bitterness hovered behind the approaching storm clouds. Once again, he was going to have to shatter that wonderful warmth into 1,000 pieces. She deserved the truth. Well, as much truth as he could share. There were some truths hiding in the dark that even now his every fiber screamed at him to leave buried in the shadows. So, what was the best way to start? There wasn't any sex. Melissa's eyes bulged and her tail twitched faster. She flung her hands up in the air, collapsing back into her chair. Seed Mother, Leo! Way to rip the bracking bandage! He grimaced. He was brushing up against something so painful he was starting to have trouble breathing. Pushing past the pain had a purpose, though. There was a part of this she needed to know, and he was going to give it to her, even if it burned him. I know what it looked like. She cut him off, voice rising. Yeah, you stumbled out of a nightclub in your shirt and boxers, uniform balled up under your arm, covered in vomit. Then you threw up on the sidewalk for good measure. Less than 2 hours after clocking out of our shift. What am I supposed to think? That you went into Anima's Pleasures to have a casual chat? While still in uniform? Apparently that part didn't last very long. Leo winced. It was definitely a good summation of how it looked. Okay, that had been exactly how she'd found him. I can promise you, nothing happened. Melissa made several noises of frustration, one hand gripping the chair, while the other was fighting not to form a fist. For a moment, Leo thought she was going to storm out as she'd done the last time he'd broached the subject. Her voice left her in a dangerous hiss. Coming out with your uniform in your hands sure doesn't look like nothing happened, Leo. Leo could feel his mouth twisting. It's the truth. Melissa's eyes rolled straight up, and her breath caught before she calmed down enough to respond. Then what did you do in there? His own memories were admittedly hazy, but he remembered the gist of it. Somehow, it was better to let her suspect him of sleeping with a random girl in the club than to admit the truth. She'd berate him if she knew. Or worse, turn him into the chief and get him fired. It was the easy path to put her back on track for promotion. Though she deserved the position more than he did, Leo couldn't afford to lose his job. Not with his mother to consider. His silence dragged on too long, and Melissa let out a frustrated huff. Will you at least tell me why you were there? I know you were going through a lot then, and I tried to give you space, but... Fanina, man. Why go there? Why not... She didn't have to finish her sentence. Why not come to me? But how could she understand? She hadn't been the one to live through it, the one who had to live with it. A small flag, no longer than a foot, bouncing off the concrete. A handful of beaded bracelets scattering forgotten to the ground. A can of spray paint rolling to a rest against a trash receptacle. An unused canister of low-grade fractal clutched in silvered fingers. Rain diluting a growing puddle of crimson. With vigor, Leo slammed the memories back into the shadows. Even letting them this close to the surface almost brought tears. He dared not glance at the nightstand. Keeping his eyes on the wall across from him, he whispered, I needed to know. Needed to know what, Leo? Her hand had finally closed into a fist, and she drove it down against her knee. Either tell me or don't, Leo, but don't keep stringing me along. Voice laden with emotional fatigue, her plea came out as an impassioned whisper. Please, haven't we been through enough for one day to just cut the dross? I needed to know what it was like, firsthand. Even just getting those words out left Leo gasping. The beeping beside him was twice what it should be. Melissa's mouth bunched up, her nose twitching, and her tail beating a rhythm against her chair. And I'm not supposed to think this is about you trying out sex? He couldn't form a verbal response and still keep the memories stuffed in the shadows, so he simply nodded. He at least managed to make eye contact, though whether it helped was impossible to tell. She met his gaze for nearly a minute, her eyes searching his for some reason not to give up on him for good. Finally, she buried her face in her hands, running her fingers along to pull back her hair. Leo, I want to trust you. Seed Mother, how I want to trust you. But I know what I saw that night, and... Melissa cut off with a growl. There were tears in her eyes now. Her voice broke when she continued, and with it, part of Leo broke as well. I wanted to be there for you. Nobody should have to go through that, Leo. People try to warn you, tell you it's part of the job, but I saw what it did to you. I wanted to help you through it. You only had to ask, Leo. I would have supported you in a heartbeat. I know. I'm sorry. Leo worried she might be interpreting this wrong, but if he corrected her, the shadows might come to light. If that happened, he would lose everything. Did I avoid you so long that now you can't even talk to me? You've got to give me something, Leo. Something that helps me know I'm not crazy. All I want is to understand. To help. And I hate that I even want to help when I'm still so angry at you. I'd consider throttling you right now, but Oof. I lost in the moment. I'd consider throttling you right now, but that'd negate all the effort we went into saving your sorry tail. Woof. We found this week's line, guys. We found it. I'd consider throttling you right now, but that'd negate all the effort we went to in saving your sorry tail. Can't you give me anything, Leo? His body was screaming for Necrol. He couldn't think, could barely breathe. Everything was numb. His hand was jittering against the railing on the bed. He wanted so badly to confide in her, to tell her everything. But it would break him. Then what would she think? I didn't cheat on you. For Hanima's sake! You went to a nightclub, Leo. Intent was there, regardless of follow-through. This wasn't going anywhere, and it was dipping too close to the edge. Desperation growing, he tried switching gears. I'm sorry. His throat was parched, and his voice cracked. I'm sorry for what I told the chief. Melissa let out a growl, one he certainly deserved. Those behavioral misconduct charges set my career back by at least 5 years, Leo. I know. You don't have to believe me, but I am sorry. He glanced at her, but her gaze was too hot to hold. In the interest of not getting burned, he studied his own fingers. I've been seriously considering resigning from the position, letting you take lead. She gaped at him, going still as a statue, but her tail still betrayed her frustration. You think that's what I want? It's what you've always wanted. It should be your position, not mine. Her fists shook where she'd pressed them to her lips. She was leaning so far forward in the chair, she could have touched the bed frame with her nose. Nina, Leo, if that's what you think, then you don't know the first thing about me. He started to apologize again, but she cut him off by standing up. I'm gonna go grab a coffee and take a quick walk to clear my head. She looked back at him through angry tears. This discussion isn't over. If we've made leaks in the dam, then we're gonna burst it tonight. Or I'm gonna decide that the evidence was right about you being a selfish piece of work and shoot you where you lay. Leo winced. Did she have to say that with his gun so prominently displayed on the nightstand? Not that she needed his gun. She was open carrying, and definitely had more recent range time than he did. She must have noticed his reaction, because her voice softened, even if her expression didn't. I'll wait a few minutes before telling the chief to come talk to you. Give you a moment to... She trailed off, but didn't finish the thought. A few moments later, she stormed out of the room, leaving Leo with a beeping monitor and the ashes of an unsuccessful apology. These are your boys? Renetta pointed to a picture frame she was currently wiping off with a towel. Considering the growing humidity, it wasn't doing much, but at least it was keeping her hands busy. Naira glanced over and nodded. Tazael and Rindal. How do you tell them apart? Naira shot her a look, and like a good politician, the woman backpedaled. I just mean that they look similar enough to be twins. They were 18 months apart. Rendal hit his growth spurt earlier than Tazael, so they wound up being the same height for most of their lives. Then she leaned over to point out differences between them. Taz has a small notch on the corner of this ear and has a charcoal muzzle like me. Need to redo that. Taz has a small notch on the corner. Uh-oh. It's always Naira's accent. Bit of water. This will help. Taz has a small notch on the corner of this ear and has a charcoal muzzle like me. Ren had eyes like spring water and more grey in his cheeks, like his father. Once they'd found the floor drain, they'd been able to unplug it. In the hour since, most of the standing water had drained away. Naira was currently burning through firearm cartridges, using her catalyst like a high-powered hairdryer to evaporate what was left. As a result, the basement was now humid and warm, the worst combination. Some of these books weren't going to survive. Naira just hoped there wouldn't be a mold problem later. How old? Tazael is 23 now. And the other? Naira fell silent. Rin was taken from us when he was 18. Renetta raised an eyebrow, but lowered her voice. By the people who want me dead? Shaking her head, Naira replied, by the police. Oh, I'm sorry for your loss. Naira rolled her eyes. I doubt that. Okay, probably not as much as I should be, but what else am I supposed to say? Nothing that will make a difference. Conversation died then. Renetta returned to collecting objects off the floor. Naira dumped an expended firearm cartridge, being careful not to touch the glowing barrel of her catalyst. As much as she wanted to let the silence continue, she needed to be learning about her guest. What about your daughter? Renetta toweled off a football covered in signatures from Tazael's class. He shrugged. What about her? What's her name? Her age? What does she do? Her name is Moira. She's 14. No, 15. She began counting on her fingers. Wait. She might be 16 now. You don't know? How do you not know? Renetta scowled at her from across the room. Look, love, life's been a whirlwind since my election, and it's been a fanina of a few years. When's her birthday? Renetta went silent for a few moments, eyes staring into the distance. Then they snapped back into focus. Oh, Nina, it was last week. And you forgot? Naira began carefully flipping pages of a damp photo album, heating them as she went. No, Sergei didn't remind me. Her father? Renetta snorted, shaking her head as she picked up something else to dry. A butler. Where his father died about 5 years ago. His kidneys stopped working, and Kiram couldn't fix them. I'm sorry. No, you're not. Whoops, that's not correct. I'm sorry. No, you're not, Renetta said in a bit of a sing-song tone. Naira pinched her fingers together. Maybe this much. Renetta snorted at that. Or maybe she huffed. It was hard to tell. After a moment, Naira poked the subject again. You seriously forgot your daughter's birthday? Rolling her eyes, Renetta said, It's not a big deal. I'll just make it up to her. Buy her some new albums for that tape player she takes everywhere or something. And that's going to make up for it. Naira tried to imagine placating Taz or Ren by just buying them something. There was no reality where that would have worked. It's what she's going to get. Nope, that's not the right voice. It's okay, guys. We're going to get there. It's what she's going to get, so it's going to have to. Then Renetta shrugged. Technically, if I die, she gets the company and all its subsidiaries. I can't imagine a better birthday gift. Naira frowned. Your daughter gets your company when you die? My assets and my legacy become rightfully hers, yes. Is that legal? Isn't the Minister of Labor supposed to relinquish stuff to their successor? Renetta squeezed water from a stray pillow. if you want to adhere to tradition, but there's no law expressly forcing that practice. Besides, if I'm not around for the role, then she needs to be set up to assume it. At 16? She's bright. She'll figure it out. Of course, she won't have to if her mother were to, you know, be alive after all. Naira shook her head. Not until I have my family back. Fine. Suit yourself, love. Smacking the pillow against the spare bed, Renetta gave it a sniff and wrinkled her nose. Now it's just dusty and damp. How long has it been since you've used this room? Years. I see. Am I sleeping here tonight? Well, if you're not leaving the basement, I suppose we can loop the cuffs through the bars of the headboard. Or, Renetta said, holding up a finger, consider, for a moment, love, that we put your weird kinks aside and just, I don't know, maybe not put me back in handcuffs? I would point out, most of this damage is due to me trying to get out of said handcuffs. Besides, you and I both know the joys of growing older. What happens when I need to use the bathroom at night? Am I supposed to drag the bed all the way to the toilet? Or simply soil the bed? Iris sighed. She was too tired to trust herself with negotiations. Maybe, as long as Renetta didn't leave the basement, she couldn't cause too much trouble. Fine, Naira conceded. No handcuffs tonight, then. Though I reserve the right to bring them back into play if you make a mess or become a further nuisance. What a generous offer, Renetta muttered. Her tone changed when Naira shot her a tired but dark look. All right. Thank you for your consideration, love. Shelving the mostly dry photo album, Naira reached for another one. Loading a fresh Firearm cartridge, she started the process over again with the next album. For a couple blessed minutes, the only sounds were of flipping pages and the renewed effort Renetta was showing in prepping the bed for herself. Then Naira had a thought. Have you announced your plans to bypass tradition? What? Regarding my position with the Ministry of Labor? No, I haven't. I thought it'd be fun to surprise some of those old fogies who are likely to expect a piece of the pie when I'm gone. If you were going the traditional route, who would take over the position? Renetta thought on this for a moment. Realistically, one of the 13 absorbs the position until an election can be held and the position is hired out on auction. And this is just your position within the 13? Or all of them? Depends on the position, I suppose. But for the most part, they all work that way. Depends on the position, I suppose. But for the most part, they all work that way. And how long until those elections happen? From when a person is retired. Letting out a humorless snort, Renetta shot back. You mean murdered? In this case? Whoops. Letting out a humorless snort, Renetta shot back. You mean murdered in this case? Usually, it's within a month or two of the opening, to keep the populace from panicking, and to spread out and balance administrative power. However, that's been a moving deadline with your handiwork. It has? Indeed it has, love. Elections were scheduled for the week after you killed Lortran. But then you killed him, and it wound up on the news, leading them to push the elections back even more. She shrugged. If we'd passed the point where the 13 were reduced to half or less, there's a special clause that lets them change the nomination and appointing processes. An emergency clause that I had at one point considered, what with how many old men are on the 13. Seemed like it might happen naturally, so I at least studied it. Didn't actually consider murdering anyone for it. Naira frowned. But as far as Cyphus knows, we've passed that point. You would have been the 7th one killed. Right, but even if you don't let me go, then Moira takes over and becomes the 7th member of the current 13. So she'd be starting with more seniority than I had. She nodded approvingly. Pieces were starting to come together, but Naira didn't like the picture being formed. You never answered. If you and Moira were both unable to fill the position, then who would be the most likely candidate? Renetta considered, and she frowned. Probably that moron, Paddock. Robert Paddock, the one number 3 mentioned. He's offered to buy my factories on numerous occasions, but he lowballs me because he doesn't respect me. As far as I know, the Senior 13 have already absorbed the vacancies. Paddock kept his position as Minister of Justice and absorbed the position of Minister of Commerce. Maybe he is gunning for my position as well, but that would imply he knew someone would try to kill me. She trailed off. And how does evil play into any of this? Naira swallowed the lump in her throat. It should have been impossible, considering the terms. It should have been impossible, considering the terms of her blackmail. But if evil was truly back... Frown deepening, Renetta thought about it for a moment. I'm not sure if it does. Like I said, they're a bunch of zealots. They've got no backing, no money, and they've harassed my factories more than any property belonging to a 13. Up until now, it's always been manageable stuff. Protests, picketing, graffiti, nothing my security company hasn't been able to squelch. She must have noticed Naira's sharp look, because she raised her hands quickly. Peacefully. We have very good non-lethal measures. We've never had a casualty arise from abuse of power or mishandling authority. Giving a slow nod, Naira continued on to the last nagging question in her mind. So, what happens when Moira steps forward as new company head? If someone tried to remove you, what stops them from trying to remove her? In that moment, Naira watched the Firearm light switch on in Madame 13's head. Oh no. Another chapter down. All right. It is 8:22. You guys want to squeeze in one more? Uno más. Uno más. Trying to decide if I want to risk more Mountain Dew because it's been making it very difficult to read when it makes me want to burp from all the carbonation. All right. We could do one more. But if it gets stale, it loses the carbonation. Then I guess that's true. Hot tea and honey would take a long time to get going. And unfortunately, I don't have tea and I don't have honey either. Because it makes my throat itchy. It's okay. It's one more chapter. We're going to make it. Chapter 13. Positions of Compromise. 3 years ago. Rain bounced off the windshield as Detective Melissa McKinley banged her head against her steering wheel. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She'd known to give Leo some space. Oh, she'd insisted on tailing him after work. Neon lights from the sign for Anima's Pleasures cast the street in a pink glow. Alternating lights depicted a horned, feline woman kicking her leg high into the air, as if trying to touch the roof of this 4-story building with her toes. In the parking lot across the street, Leo's car sat empty. She'd watched him amble inside, uniform and all. He hadn't looked happy, and Melissa doubted a place like this could really help. They'd been dating for over a year, and never once had Leo expressed interest in anything remotely like this. He was reeling, and this was just a further sign to her that he was spiraling. She'd tried to reach out, to listen, but he was staying tight-lipped about the whole thing. On her own time, she'd read the report cover to cover, but that wasn't the same thing. She told herself he'd open up when he was ready. Apparently, he was ready to open up something else. With a noise containing both a groan and a growl, she smacked her head into her steering wheel again. It set off her horn, and she stayed there for a few seconds, screaming into the wave of sound. The logical side of her said to let him have his night of fun and just try to be there for him when he was ready. But the emotional side of her was devastated that he would rather seek comfort from a stranger than from her. What had she done wrong? Had she pushed too hard to get him to talk? Tears started then, and she leaned back into her cruiser's seat to wipe her eyes with her palms. Her hand came to rest on her keys. She should go. She knew that. Whatever was going on in there was only going to hurt her more. But she couldn't leave. Giving one final grunt of frustration, Melissa grabbed her badge, stowed her gun under the seat, pulled the hood of her coat up over her ears, and stepped out into the rain. Seed mother. Of course Leo had to choose to come here on a storm day. Another car pulled into the parking lot as she crossed the street. 4 young sneppards hopped out, likely all male, dressed in t-shirts and easily removable pants. Their ears and tails were far too perky as they dashed through the rain for the door. The bouncer studied each of them in turn before opening the door. He called something after them, but they paid him no mind. He turned to regard her as she approached, and she was surprised to see that the bouncer was a Nolf. A well-built one, though, who was no doubt quite capable of doing his job. He flinched when Melissa flashed her badge, which helped her relax just a little. "I'm looking for another officer who came through here about 10 minutes ago?" The Nolf chewed on his lip, obviously weighing his options. Melissa needed to put his mind at ease that cooperating wouldn't cost him his job. "Look, I'm not here to make any busts. I'm going in with blind eyes, and what happens in here will stay in here. I'm off duty. I just want to make sure my partner's okay." He considered this for a few moments, but Melissa waited patiently. She was used to Nolfs being a bit slow. Finally, he nodded. "Yeah, he headed inside. Ask around, you'll probably find him. Snops ain't exactly easy to hide." He opened the door for her, and she stepped inside. The hallway she entered was dark, save for a series of Fyrom lights set along the wall on either side of her. Water streamed from folds in her hood as she pulled it back. Her ears waggled as she tried to shake excess water free. Running a quick hand through her hair to fix it, she continued down the hall. The ground vibrated with the deep thrum of a bass guitar amplified through Electrum speakers. She could hear the music all too clearly, even though the door was over 20 feet away and closed. Oh boy. Pushing the door open unleashed a wall of sound that made her flatten her ears. The music wasn't unpleasant in itself, but it was far too loud. Every repeated strum sent a pulse through her body, like she was feeling the nightclub's heartbeat. Beside her, a Sneppard guard eyed her as she stepped in. Unlike Leo, she'd had the forethought to change into street clothes before entering a place like this, but that didn't mean she wasn't going to use her badge. Melissa explained her situation to the guard, noticing with envy that the guard had a set of earplugs in. "Do you have any more of those?" she shouted over the den. The guard smirked and held up a finger. They walked over to a nearby bar counter and spoke with the barkeep behind it. A few moments later, an exchange was made, and the guard returned to provide Melissa with a set of disposable earplugs. Giving her thanks, she put them in while turning to follow the directions. Whoops. Tripped over that one. I blame the Mountain Dew. Giving her thanks, she put them in while turning to follow the directions the guard had given her. The earplugs settled into place, bringing immediate relief. It wasn't that the music was particularly energetic in here, just smotheringly loud. The room itself was a large auditorium, with dozens of booths set along the walls and the back. A live band played up on a small stage, and everything in here was lit with purple and pink neon lights fixed high in the ceiling. A large crowd of people stood in the center of the room, swaying to the music and shamelessly grinding against one another. She even spotted a few Nolfs standing out, and quite literally standing taller than the Sneppards in the throng. Alcohol was everywhere, and it showed in the behaviors Melissa witnessed as she crossed the room. Several corner tables especially stood out when she spotted some suspicious small metal canisters and the telltale prismatic glowing eyes of a person on Fractal. No wonder the bouncer had been worried. But Melissa was a woman of her word. Whenever she finally left, she never wanted to remember this place again. It was very much not her scene. Several people tried to catch her attention, but she ignored them all. One man went so far as to grab her arm, but she twisted free. She had to stop herself from entering a fighting stance on the spot. It wouldn't do to get caught in an off-duty fist fight, so she just kept moving. She reached a door, flanked by two sneppards in reflective dresses with slit thighs and plunging necklines. One looked her up and down, while the other consulted a list. Already got an appointment, sweetheart? Or looking for something less formal and more immediate? She gave a wink as she asked. The eyes of the woman beside her were trespassing on Melissa's body, and it killed any desire to be tactful, complicit, or subtle. A flash of her badge just seemed to excite the women more, and they let her examine the list as long as she wanted. Leo had booked a room, so Melissa memorized the number and pushed past the women. The one made an offer to escort her, but Melissa emphatically turned her down. As she neared the door she needed, Melissa found herself doubting again. Did she really want to go through with this? What was she going to find on the other side of that door? She could feel that she was inches from breaking. One little push would send her off the edge and leave her an emotional wreck. Still, it was a strong desire for finding and upholding the truth that had pushed her to become a detective in the first place. People needed to be held accountable, even ones who were suffering like Leo. It took another several seconds of staring frozen at the door before she finally knocked. There was no reply. Another door opened nearby, and a sneppered man appeared in only his underwear before running down the hall to disappear into a restroom. Melissa recognized him as one of the young men she'd seen in the parking lot. A muzzle poked out of his room a few moments later as a Nolfin woman peered out after him, her long, dark hair falling down in sheets that only partially covered her toplessness. She spotted Melissa, looked her up and down, and gave her a grin and a wink. Her eyes bore a faint prismatic sheen. If everyone here kept looking at Melissa like that, she might change her mind about bringing the law down on this place. Melissa knocked again, but heard nothing from the other side. Not that she trusted her hearing in a place like this. Based on what was happening in this hallway, it was all the more reason to keep her earplugs in. By the third knock, she was losing her patience, so she tried the door. To her surprise, it was unlocked, which seemed absolutely not safe as a business practice. Her nose was immediately attacked by a thick necral cloud. She grimaced. She and Leo had both agreed to give up smoking. Considering what he'd been through in the last month, it wasn't surprising that he'd relapsed, but Seed Mother. Had he lost all faith in Melissa to be at least somewhat understanding? The room was a small thing, dimly lit by more of that purple and pink neon. A small table held towels and robes and some packaged snacks and bottled water. A bowl beside it held a bunch of individually wrapped objects Melissa forced herself to ignore. That was easy to do, since the bed was the focus of the room. Problem was, they hadn't even made it to the bed. Leo and some random sneppered female were sprawled across the floor. Leo had stripped down to his shirt and undergarments, and the woman was wearing his uniform. He was laying partly next to her and partly atop her, and they were both unconscious. The woman's front was covered in vomit, and despite her disgust for the situation, Melissa forced herself to check that they were both still breathing. Leo, what the fanina did you do here? She muttered. Neither of them were responsive, and when Melissa checked Leo's eyes, she caught a prismatic glow to them. That's when she spotted several discarded metal canisters lying on the floor nearby. Seed Mother. This could cost him his career. He didn't need that, not with his mother to consider. Then she spotted his gun, unholstered, discarded near the woman's head, partly hidden by her hair. Really? Melissa snatched it up and checked the chamber. It was empty, so was the magazine. She breathed out a sigh of relief. At least the idiot hadn't brought a loaded gun into the club. Necral's scent still hung thick in the air, though with the open door it was dissipating. Melissa remained crouched there for a few moments, staring at the unconscious form of a man that up until an hour ago she had admired. Seeing him like this was tearing her apart on an atomic level. Tears crept into the corner of her eyes, and when she could bear the sight no more, she fled the room. Awkwardly, she stuffed the empty gun into her waistband, covering the grip with her shirt. She followed bright exit signs down the hall until finally she burst out into the rain once more. Melissa didn't bother with her hood. It didn't matter if she got soaked by the rain. She wasn't sure how much mattered now. In Leo's hour of need, he turned to sex and drugs, not to the woman who loved him. Anger and sorrow strangled each other in her head, both fighting to see who would be the last one standing. Inappropriate use of police equipment for personal use? Fractal abuse as a uniformed officer? She could easily report him for this. She should report him for this. It was what he deserved for his actions. And then maybe in rehab, he could finally get the help he actually needed. She wanted to punch something, to scream, to rake her claws through something. Instead, she stumbled over to a nearby street lamp, dimly flickering with fire and light. Gripping it with trembling hands, she brought her forehead to rest against the wet metal surface and started to weep. Minutes passed like that, rain pelting her neck and running down her back. Fingers and face numb, but not from cold. The fur on her arms was such a sopping mess, it did little more than smear her tears across her face. The door crashed open, metal banging against brick exterior. She heard someone stumble outside, and was immediately self-conscious of her appearance. Melissa did her best to wipe her face and straighten up. It was quickly apparent she was worried for nothing when the new person down the sidewalk started vomiting. Glancing that way, she froze. It was Leo, uniform balled up under his arm, hands on his knees, hacking up something that dribbled from his mouth only to get lost in the rain. He spit, wiping his mouth with a shaking arm. Then he saw her. Fractal's glow still danced in his eyes. Before she could say anything, he spoke through trembling lips. "Melissa, I think I messed up. I need help." Present day. Melissa pounded the vending machine with her fist. The stupid thing had just gypped her of a full Christum. Crashing sounds accompanied a metallic whine, and the whole machine rocked in place. Her can of soda arrived at the dispenser, but the machine didn't give her any change. Sighing, she grabbed her drink. It sprayed her in the face when she opened it, and she cursed with enough volume that a nearby nurse blushed. Now her fur was sticky. Perfect. First the coffee shop had been closed, now this. Melissa took a few minutes at the restroom sink to wash off her face. For the first time in her life, she tried using the wall-mounted Fyram drying unit to dry her face. It kind of worked. Glancing up at the mirror, she scowled. She was just going to have to accept that her cheek fur was going to look weird for a bit. Exiting the bathroom, she sipped her drink. It was horrifically sweet, but she needed the caffeine. It had been a long day. As she wandered the halls, shouting caught her attention. She moved towards it to find that Chief Bradburn had cornered Tolson. Both of them were taller and larger than her, but something about the chief's build was far more imposing. Even now, he was inches from his nephew's face, lips twisted in a snarl. "You let her go home? She was there at the scene. You can't just let her leave. If foul play is involved, she's at least a suspect, if not a witness." Tolson's head had receded into his shoulders so much his neck wasn't visible anymore. "But the doctor said she was free to go, so I just assumed..." Bradburn cut him off. "You're not paid to assume things, Tolson. You're paid to do your duty. Do you realize how many strings I've had to pull just to keep you on the force? If you got canned, your mother would kill me. But you make it incredibly difficult sometimes because you're so incompetent." Melissa didn't outrank the chief, but that didn't mean it was okay for him to lose his cool, so she cleared her throat rather loudly. Both men looked her way. Tolson looked relieved. The chief still looked angry. "Officer Gray," he said to his nephew, "you're already off duty for the evening. Go home and spare us from further mistakes." Tolson blinked, then turned back to the chief. He nervously played with his fingers. Actually, sir, I was gonna go keep Leo company. Bradburn's eyes shot up into his skull, and he let out a deep sigh that hinted at the enormity of his chest cavity. Fine. I'll be by shortly to interview him, and I'll send you home then. It wasn't a request, and Tolson meekly nodded his understanding. Felt wrong to see such a large and jovial man acting like a beaten kitten. He gave Melissa a nod as he passed her. Detective McKinley? Officer Gray? She caught his arm as he passed. Surprised, Tolson gave her a questioning look. Leaning in, she lowered her voice. Don't let it get to you. You're a good snop, but I think we all could use a little rest after today. A hint of his natural smile returned. Yeah, thanks, Melissa. She released her grip and patted his arm. Then he left. Sipping from her drink, Melissa stepped forward. Chief? Bradburn's voice was weary with exasperation. Detective? Everything all right, sir? No, everything is not all right. I've got a detective in the hospital as a victim of attempted arson, and I can't question the primary suspect because my nephew is too much of a Cub Scout to see the big picture. Melissa frowned. The chief wasn't usually this callous. He was gruff and direct, but this was a level of rudeness she'd never seen him show towards family. Of course, she didn't exactly attend their family barbecues either, so maybe he was just practiced at hiding this side of himself from the public eye. You suspect your own specialist, sir? I suspect everyone these days. I was told the vehicle was tampered with. He doesn't have the guts to kill himself, or we would have lost him 3 years ago. Besides, his vehicle went up in flames. I imagine that's something an alchemist can do. Melissa's frown deepened. The chief really was in a sour mood. She thought back to helping the native pull Leo from the flames. Sir, that woman was genuinely injured in the fire. Fanina, she made herself bleed to use magic to keep Leo alive until the paramedics arrived. If she wanted him dead, why go to so much trouble to keep him alive? The chief shrugged, eyes strangely hard. Never claimed to understand native behavior. Spend enough time on Fractal and you lose the ability to think straight. We're paying the school to compensate her for her time. Maybe she realized this would cost her her job, so she wanted to look like a good citizen and keep up appearances. That felt like an incredible stretch to Melissa, but the chief's mood wasn't something she wanted to mess with, so she settled with a compromise. Maybe. What are you going to do now, sir? I'm going to interview Detective Parsons. Then I'm going to find a way to catch whoever's behind all of this. This case is blown out of control. More than 10 dead in 6 months, 7 of whom were members of the 13. And despite sticking who I thought were my 2 brightest detectives on the case, they both floundered and wasted time. Time the psychotic native has used to kill again and again. I've got families breathing down my neck demanding justice, and see to mother help me, I'm going to make sure they get it. Melissa felt like she'd been slapped across the cheek. Sir, I hardly think that's fair. We've made headway on the case, but we're tracking one of the most dangerous targets in recent years. Correct. But you've both done such a fine job of it that you couldn't find her if she was right under your nose. So now my tail is on the line because I've hired a bunch of slacking kids who can't do their jobs. Melissa's nose wrinkled. All due respect, sir, but this is not just a normal case, and I have not been slacking. Did you or did you not pass the alchemist on to Detective Parsons? Frowning, she gave a small nod. I did. And you deemed this a wise decision, considering his condition? He has seniority, sir. Seniority you gave him when he wasn't the one who applied for it. That drew a snarl to his lips, his whiskers twitching. Vanina, McKinley, not this again. I told you to settle your issues already. He brought charges, and you signed the papers to waive your right to contest. Seed Mother only knows why you did. It was a stupid decision, and in so doing, you've tied not only your hands, but also mine. I needed to fill the position, and your actions removed you from candidacy. End of story. Don't bring it up anymore. Melissa knew exactly why she did it. She knew it had been a stupid decision, but it was the decision she had made, and she wasn't going to let it drag her career down with it. No, she was going to excel in spite of it. But with that decision had come a promise to herself. She'd saved Leo's career once. She didn't owe it to him to do it again. If he screwed up and got fired, that was on him. She didn't want it to happen, but she'd stuck her neck out for him before, and it had nearly cost her her dreams. Never again. Biting her tongue kept a dozen responses at bay. She couldn't deny having some desire to throw Leo under the bus. She still hurt when she looked at him, but it would be a waste. Not to mention that it probably wouldn't change anything now. It wouldn't boost her career. All it would accomplish would be to screw over both him and his mother. She couldn't do that to either of them, even if he might deserve it. Her lips so close. Her lips quivered to contain a snarl as she nodded slowly. Very well, sir. However, I believed that despite his past, he was better suited for the task of cooperating with an outside agency than I. All due respect, sir. I tend to speak my mind, and it can cause problems. Chief Bradburn's breath left him in a long sigh that made him sound 20 years older than he looked. It's not a bad trait, Detective. Just know that for every problem created, someone always has to deal with it. Right now, that someone is me. Where's Parsons' room? It's just this way, sir. That was the end of the exchange. No more words were traded between them as she led him to the correct room. Settling down in a chair outside, she sipped on her soda as Bradburn entered the room. She grimaced. Something had let The last line, really? She grimaced. Something had left a bad taste in her mouth. Get that ready for next time. Ugh. The plot thickens. More history comes to light. And now I can actually finish the Mountain Dew. The good news is that's about the spiciest scene in Alchemancers, so. It also very much hits on, some of the more cyberpunky vibes that I want. But yeah, how's everyone doing? How's everyone enjoying the story? We got 3 more chapters under our belt tonight. Aw. Thanks, guys. Oh. Next chapter is fun. We get to learn about another secret side of Naira. Oh. I listened to this next part that's coming up. I remember when I was writing this chapter, there's specifically the music from the Matrix movies that happens almost any time that they're in a car chase. I had that on loop for this upcoming chapter, and so even just reading it a little bit, I'm starting to hear the music looping in my head, and it makes me very happy. But yeah, we'll pick up with Naira next time. Having realized that, with Renetta, quote, out of the picture, and a young, small 16-year-old girl next in line to take over, there is something of a target there. And maybe that's something that should be dealt with. Ounce of prevention or something like that. So yeah, we'll pick up there next week. And thank you all for coming. Love you guys. And can't wait to see you next week and read more. So have a good night, everybody.